Yes, welcome back. This is A RAP CRITIC. I'm your boy Malik 16, and no, I refuse to say what the dealio because unfortunately that phrase got killed quite quickly, almost within the same year. Got very Karenized in the mainstream, pretty much the same way that another phrase from another 1997 album, Getting Jiggy With It from Big Willie Style, got played out. So you won't hear that phrase coming out of my mouth. But shout out to Busta Rhymes for pioneering that. We talked about that in the last episode. This is episode 2, where we go over category 2, which is the rap performance on the album. And what album are we talking about? None other than When Disaster Strikes by Busta Rhymes, his sophomore album. I'm not going to waste any time because I'm assuming you didn't waste any time going to the raproulette.com and leaving your votes and rankings and like and subscribing to the channel. So let's jump right into it. Dimension 1, personality and charisma. Do I really need to go into detail about the personality and charisma element of Busta Rhymes' presentation on this album? Busta Rhymes is walking personality and charisma. More personality than charisma, because you are getting a boisterous presence on the microphone. There's not room for you not to pay attention. What you're paying attention to, that's a different question, but you will have your attention commanded by Busta Rhymes from the moment he steps on the mic. I mentioned how on the intro, he doesn't really say anything. He asks if you can cut the music, and he laughs maniacally, and just that alone lets you know that you're in for something. And so what you get is a full display of all the aspects of Busta Rhymes' personality. He's giving you toned down, he's giving you full wild man, he's giving you the anchor. You know, on tracks like Body Rock and We Can Take It Outside, Busta Rhymes is actually the calmer anchor. And we'll talk more about that as we go along. But you are getting this larger than life personality and presence, which is hard to put your fingers on. You just know that it's a big personality and it makes you want to listen. And so that's all something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. That takes us to dimension 2, where it comes down to the question of suspension of disbelief versus believability. And now Busta does this thing on this album where he's doing what a lot of crews in hip hop were doing at the time, but when he's telling street tales, instead of directly digging from an autobiographical linear space, he starts telling this plot with a lot of different things going on, and the hitters are all members of his Flip Mode squad. And so as soon as he starts doing that, there becomes this element of suspending disbelief, because it's this murder plot with killing and shootouts, and as soon as he does that, you're pretty much being asked to suspend your disbelief, because there's just no way that you're expected to understand that a caravan of rappers are pulling these jobs while they're rolling with a platinum artist. So I mean, it's just it's some of the claims that he makes when he's using intimidation, imagery of violence. Even part 1 of that song, Things We Be Doing for Money, where he's talking about going out to commit a jukes. He's gonna be a stick-up kid, or he's gonna rob the stick-up kid because he knows they have money to get money, then spend it at the bar. He's gonna stab someone, then he's beating him down. There's this like little intermission in the middle of the song where he's just beating him off the curb and taking the block. It's Busta Rhymes. At this point, he's been in movies, he's been on platinum selling records. He's not doing that. And if he was telling it from a past perspective, then it might have helped the believability factor. But you're being asked to suspend your disbelief for the sake of storytelling on a rap album. And Busta doesn't give you any bookends to that. He's not saying he cares either way, whether you believe it or not. And he's not setting it up for you to believe it. Like, this is the realest. You know, he's just presenting it as a story on the album. Other than that, do you believe that Busta is the smoking, drinking, partying guy, or get the party started guy? Where he's like, we can party in the loft. Here's what we doing. Here's what we riding in. Kind of down to earth, pretty pedestrian, pretty easy to believe. But these are all things to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats when we're talking about this dimension. That takes us to dimension 3, the ziggy, 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 ziggy. Delivery. If Busta Rhymes was to teach any class as a rap professor, I would want Busta Rhymes to teach delivery. On this album, the first 3 songs alone, you're getting a scope of his delivery. You're getting the first song where he's doing this super zoomed in enunciation thing that he had just picked up on, which became his thing, where he's just like, yo, my lyrics give you a concussion. He wants to enunciate every syllable of every word. And then on the second track, Survival Hungry, you're getting that loud T-Rex version of Busta Rhymes that people would come to characterize him by, the rah, because he's like, yo, so that even that is him manipulating his voice to have a different presence, because it takes something to Sammy Davis Jr., your throat like that. And I mentioned that he puts this tremolo on his voice every now and then when he goes, when he adds the little reverberation on the end of some of his words to keep a certain cadence going. And so to go, yo, he's doing that from the back of his throat, because on the following track, When Disaster Strikes, you'll hear his regular Busta Rhymes voice, which is the voice that he's come to run with more so in his later years, where it's just a straightforward. But before you got that, you already got the 2 other voices. And then on top of that, on that song, When Disaster Strikes, the title track, he's doing that sing-song thing that I mentioned in video 1. He's choosing to vacillate on that track between his regular Busta voice and this sing-songy cadence, where he goes from being playfully singing to like operatic. Watching that and let him fall. It's being free on the mic to the highest degree. And he's giving you that early on. So by the time he does the next track, which is So Hardcore, he's doing a mix of the two. He's starting to blend the two together. Yo, I run through a brick wall. There's a lot of staccato enunciation in his delivery. And he revels in that. He thrives in that. And so you get a track like Get High Tonight, where he's combining 2 of those voices. He'll give you the voice from the first song and the second song. He'll start off at one projected level, and then the next 2 bars are, hey yo, it's Flip Mode, yo, we down thinking that it's just, he's playing with all of his different projection styles, making his delivery have the craziest range of any rapper in 1997, let alone the craziest range of most rappers in history. So by the time you get to 1 where he's really toning it down and it's more this talking style, you've heard so many shades and tones of Busta Rhymes. Rhymes galore is back to that woo-ha energy, and he's no stranger to playing with the way his ad-libs come in and complement that, the question marks that he puts on stuff, the humor that he adds in just his inflection. There's a part on When Disaster Strikes where he's like, see, you could be something, where you could just picture Busta Rhymes softening up his whole demeanor just to say that line and then going right back into the dragonness, right? So these are all things to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats when you're thinking about the delivery and the wide scope that Busta Rhymes is giving you in this dimension. Takes us to dimension 4, everyone's favorite, the flow. Okay, now the second thing that Busta is famous for is his flow patterns. Busta rhymes like no one else. If you're gonna have all of these different delivery setups, your flows better match that, and Busta doesn't disappoint. The way he's bouncing with the bass line on So Hardcore is seamless. That staccato enunciation where he's just volleying his flow pattern. That's it. The whole song is pretty much broken up like that. Now, you compare that to Rhymes Galore, you can tell that there is a freeness, but a deliberate thought process into the way that Busta wants to execute how he leads his verses off. So, yo, mayday, 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 mayday. You may have heard that pattern, but the delivery gives those patterns new life each time. So even if it is the same structure as a song prior, that delivery is just lining it up perfectly. Now, where Busta does switch it up, really in obvious places where he switches it up is like what I talked about on Put Your Hands Where My Eyes Can See. That flow pattern just unheard from Busta or anyone in hip hop, going deliberately with that drum pattern. That, yo, it's a must that you heard of us, shall we murder us? A lot of people, it's just continuing that for an entire verse. That's where the impressiveness comes in. It's one thing to keep a pattern where you're doing it and it sounds lazy and people get bored with it, but Busta has the ability to keep one flow pattern for an entire song and keep you engaged and intrigued and listening for how he flips it. It's like he never runs out of words to squeeze in there, and he will use all the syllables available to him to make them fit perfectly. There's not a moment where Busta Rhymes goes off beat. Sometimes he rides a sentence to the last rhyming point, but for the most part, there's this in-pocket snap to how Busta flows. And so you're gonna get the most different flow on songs like Put Your Hands Where My Eyes Can See. We mentioned When Disaster Strikes, where he's going back and forth between rapping and singing. Dangerous, which has a very unorthodox pattern. And the most standout change in flow is what I think he does on Body Rock, where he comes in, yo, check out the way that hitting it. He does that pattern for as long as he can on his short verse, and it's such a standout because we hadn't heard that flow from Busta ever before or anywhere else on the album, and it comes so late on the album, and it stands out from everyone else just riding that lazy beat. We talked about how lazy and really stripped down that beat was, and you already have rappers like Mace and Rampage who have a very straightforward rap style and are just gonna go with the tide of where the track takes them. Busta's going against the grain on that track, so it stands out. Busta also plays with his flow on We Can Take It Outside, where he gets to the ending sequence of his verse and he's like, suddenly we chalking you out. On the real, half of y'all will be bugging me out. And he starts stretching and exaggerating certain words. And because Busta's delivery is so dynamic, his flow patterns have to be equally dynamic. And he benefits from the marriage of both. That's where he shines. Something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. That takes us to dimension 5. Wordplay and bar intent. In video 1, there was a conversation point about a lot of Busta Rhymes, his actual things said on the mic being forgettable, and I realized why. Busta Rhymes writes in freestyle form, and there's a good amount of rappers who do this and have been able to get away with it. A good amount of the Wu-Tang members seem to write that way. Snoop being the most infamous for writing that way, where it just sounds like I am rhyming words that come to my mind first and connecting them later. And we can hear that from a rapper's ear. You can hear when rappers think about the word connection and then putting it together first, as opposed to this approach. The risk you run is empty bars, where it's a lot of syllables, it's a lot of flow, the verses are filled up, but with a whole lot of just rap for the sake of rap. It's just rhyming words. What that creates is a 50-50 probability of saying something keen and something dope and clever, or just saying something that makes it complete. And so you'll get imagery. There's lines like he says, illusions of my lyrics giving you massages in the coffin. Who thinks of lines like that? That's why Busta Rhymes is a one of one. Because think of that imagery. Illusions of my lyrics giving you massages in the coffin. But for every line like that, for every one line like that, you get a line like, while you coughing, I be flossing like a effing dolphin. I rest my case. You get 2 lines like that for every one line. There's just a lot of broken up rap And because of that, when you write, you're just like, yo, I'm wearing black, you whack. Hit you like a back of a dat. Where's the gat? That's freestyle writing. When you choose to use that same ethic that you put into a freestyle where you're just trying to maintain the rhyme in your writing, that tells me, one, you didn't really super edit this, and it wasn't the effect you were going for. You weren't going for lyricism. You were going for song vibe. No one could ever argue about Busta Rhymes' impact as someone to create a song vibe. He says a line, "We getting paper, spreading love and happiness," over the Turn It Up track with the Al Green sample from the song Love and Happiness. So tongue in cheek and not delivered in a way where he cares if you get it or not. It's just word association for Busta. There's a part where he says Christopher Columbus and his ad libs, and then this says, and it follows that by saying discover. He starts the next line with the word discover, but that's where it begins and ends. That's the extent of him connecting thoughts, connecting words, trying to make any clever association. He is way more into imagery of how he will intimidate and impact the world with his rhymes. And that's something you realize if you're one of the people who took the time to memorize the words, to put your hands where my eyes could see back in the day, or even presently. You're like, oh, this is dope how he stayed in pocket for these whole verses. But there's a whole lot of, you know, my main thug villain named Julio, he moody, yo, type of killer that'll slap you with the toolie, yo. And then you take lines like the ones I mentioned from the end of his verse on We Could Take It Outside, and it's like, y'all be bugging me out, be walking me out. This is part of why the comparisons to Missy also remain, because Missy is also prone to do those same kind of playful delivery structures and flow structures, but have about the same equivalent of content as Busta Rhymes, where it's just freestyle style writing. Like, she might say wata ta ta bata ta 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 ta, but Busta Rhymes is gonna say my chicka chicka, making you dance. So still incorporating things that aren't even words just to get to a rhyme feel. The vibes. Something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. That takes us to dimension 6, where we talk about the overall quotability, the punchlines, or the poetic wisdom. Busta Rhymes not being a punchline rapper, you will find them far and few in between here. Walk barefoot on like Kunta Kinte. You're gonna get really elementary like type similes, and that's where it ends. Not a lot of metaphors, comparative language, but mostly in an imagery sense. Now, when it comes to poetic wisdom, there's those moments on songs like The Things We've Been Doing for Money where he says things that contradict the overall space that the song took you. So he's saying, man, all this just because I was trying to get some paper, just because I was trying to stick somebody up. I wish we didn't have to do this stuff to each other. But it's a little too late, because the whole series of songs was this bloody mess about robbery and gunfights. So it didn't seem like it was going to a message place. On one, if you subscribe to some of the beliefs that Erica and Busta are talking about, some of the principles about how relationships work, then you can find some poetic wisdom there. But for the most part, it's not the kind of album that's giving you that kind of platform for those gems to be dropped. Busta is not squeezing life lessons or things that become quotable to live by. But if you find some, please let me know. Leave it in the comments, and something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. Dimension 7, concepts. All right, there's super loose concepts here. The whole world looking at me. We talked about in video 1 how just in title alone and some of the ad-libs, Busta's giving the impression that he's speaking about people expecting and anticipating this album to see what he's going to come with next. Survival Hungry, he's trying to bring across this idea of the people that he runs with, including himself, come from a place where they're down to do whatever to get this loot. Don't test them when they're hungry. But Busta has been so far removed from being street hungry that the song doesn't really line up, and it just becomes another showcase for him to brag and rap. There's less conceptual stuff and more topical stuff. There's nothing here where he's really going into an abstract bag or taking on the properties of something, or telling a rhyme or a story in a way that's outside the box. So again, if y'all find things that you believe to be conceptual, besides the intro, right? You got the intro and the outro. Those are conceptual because Busta Rhymes is the disaster that's striking hip hop. That's what he's representing. That's the metaphorical stuff right there. But if y'all find anything else, let it be known. Something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. Now we talk about the content. Dimension 8, externalized. What is Busta Rhymes talking that's not expository, inner monologue, and emotion based? Well, you have Get High Tonight. That is the smoking and drinking party anthem where surprisingly Busta stays focused on just that. It doesn't become this time to like brag or battle rap. It's him just talking about getting with a group of his friends and having a good time that consists of smoking and drinking. Then you have One, which is this relationship based song where him and Erykah Badu are going back discussing what they believe to be the principles of a working, strong foundation of a relationship based on the 5% teachings. So it's a focused topic matter that is a little bit of Busta in it and a little bit of Erykah. So it straddles the line between being a part of Dimension 8, which is the externalized content, and Dimension 9, which is the internalized content. And that's about as close as you get to that, where Busta's talking about things from his life. Things we be doing for money, if you believe that it's autobiographical based off Busta's experience or some real life stick up kid shootout, bang bang stuff that Flip Mode Squad went through from parts 1 and part 2, then cool. But for the most part, it's just a street story and it exists. Get Off My Block, similar territory. It's a mix between bragging and street story. And that's it. And that's where this album lives and dies when it comes to content. Maybe you consider that a weakness, that an album with this many songs is lacking in the substance that it gives you, but that's all something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. Takes us to the final dimension for category 2, dimension 10, storytelling. Busta Rhymes tells stories on this album. The Things We Be Doing for Money series, where it's part 1 and part 2, are your linear stories or easiest to follow stories. This is an era in hip hop where, because storytelling was such an emphasized element and aspect of rap albums, everyone felt like they needed to have one, but everyone was not the greatest at making them. And this, because it's this street story and just kind of comes from this dark place, it's not just like, it's not a cautionary tale, and it's more of a braggadocio street tale, and you don't really get clarity on whether Busta is saying this is him or he's representing that character. You're just left to decide yourself based on your suspension of disbelief level. And the story doesn't follow a straight path. You know, he's beating up a guy for money, then he gets surrounded by old boys posse, I guess, until he calls the Flip Mode Squad, and for some reason they don't kill Busta, and he has all this time to stall for Flip Mode Squad to come and just murder everyone, and only Spliff Star gets hit, and Busta is questioning why this all happened at the end of the song. But that's after a lot of minutes of braggadocio about being so good at being murderous and volatile and sticking people up. So I mean, that's the extent. There's no other storytelling on this entire album. And if you consider that a weakness, that's something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. And with that, we conclude the category 2 review of this classic album from 1997. When Disaster Strikes, some people feel it is Busta Rhymes' best album. Some feel it is sandwiched between his 2 best albums, but that's all for you to talk about in the comments below, and go rank on the raprouleur.com. Once again, shout out to my outfit. Shout out to my nephew on the beat. Happy birthday to the kid. If you want to check out his production, go hit him up on the tag at the end of this video. Y'all know what it is. A RAP CRITIC. They talk about it while I live it. Word to meth. Peep the hat too. Plates and Crates original, that waffle logo. It's been a minute since I brought it back. It's been a minute since I tried to keep this hat on my head. So shout out to y'all for rocking with me. Had some Ray J moments.